Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional, human rights and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumila Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by tweeting us at Rights and Recourse or calling our studio line on 011-714-5497 or 5498. Alternatively, email your thoughts to Rights and Recourse at sabc.co.za. In 1995, during the adoption of the Freedom Charter by the African National Congress, our grandparents were made to believe that the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all, and it further stated that education shall be free, compulsory, and equal to all children. Higher education and technical training shall be open to all by means of state allowances and scholarships awarded on the basis of merit. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa emphasized this notion. It states everyone has the right to basic education, including adult education, and to further education, which the state, through reasonable means, must make progressively available and accessible. In the light of the ongoing impasse at our universities with the relentless calls for free tertiary education, Rights and Recourse examines the feasibility of free higher education in South Africa and asks the dreaded question, can we afford free education? But first, let's take a look at this insert.
Firstly, the issue of the academic freedom. I think all of us have agreed that you need academic freedom as enshrined in the Constitution. And that freedom is important for education. We have also said there must be an autonomy of the institutions of higher learning so that they can do their work without much interference. What we are saying, because that matter has been raised by the students very strongly, is one of the matters they've raised very strongly. We have said autonomy will be looked at by the Commission, is one of the matters that will be looked at. And I'm sure there will be a very specific recommendation on that matter that we'll have to look at when the Commission reports. If you asked me politically, my own view, there is no autonomy that could be absolute. It's relative. And everything is relative. And that is what must be found within balancing. Because it must be balanced. You can't have an autonomy that is absolute, it's not relative. That's a political point, very important political point. And we are saying, therefore, how do you balance these two? Well, they need to be balanced. That, again, without giving instructions to the Commission, we will hear when they do their work and when they report, what are they saying on those matters. With regard to the matter of free university education, I'm sure you will recall, Honorable Member, that the matter of free education is a policy of the ruling party. That's our policy. Established decades ago. And we have tried to begin to implement it. That is why, at the lower levels, there are schools that are free from fees as part of the implementation of that policy. What we have not done is to say from today, the education is free. But we have said that is our goal. We have started the implementation. Poor students or young people from poor families are no longer paying school up to matric. That's part of the implementation of the policy. With regard to the institutions of higher learning, That's a matter we've been looking at. And the department has been looking at it, actually put up a commission or a grouping to deal with the matter, investigate it, come up. There is even a report that has been written on that issue to say, how do we implement this? That report, for an example, will be taken into consideration by the commission so that it will come up. What I am happy about is that for the first time in the country, everybody agreed with the ANC policy that there must be free education. Wonderful.
Everybody agreed with the ANC that there must be free education. We are joined on the line to discuss this matter by Musa Ndwandwe, spokesperson of the Fees Commission. And at our Port Elizabeth studio, we have Mr. Zolisa Mahau from the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. And here in the studio with me, we have an economist, because we need to find out where the money is going to come from, Mr. Ian Krushenk. I think I'm right in pronouncing that surname.
Well done.
Who is an economist with the South African Institute for Resolution. Gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to
Good
Rights and
afternoon, and
Recourse.
it's good to be with you. Thank you.
Let's start with you, Mr. Ndwandwe, if you can hear us. Can you give us an update as to where the Commission is now with its trying to find out what should happen to higher education fees?
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Mateza. Good afternoon to the fellow panelists and all the viewers. Yes, the Commission is continuing with its work. Tomorrow we'll be in Pretoria, where the National Planning Commission will be the key witnesses, looking at the issue of post-school education and looking at the various reports that were recommendations that were made, seeing as to why they were not implemented, and looking at the assumptions that were being made to actually come up with the solution, as you have said, of implementing free higher education and training.
Tell me, the other thing that many of us are waiting for is, according to number 3 in the terms of reference, says the Commission shall submit interim reports and recommendations to the President whenever it is necessary. Have you done so? Because I understand the President has called an imbizo tomorrow.
Yeah, regarding the interim report, that is due in November, so it's a month from now. And speaking about that, we'd love as a Commission to explain that even though it was tasked to look into the feasibility of fee-free education, it is indeed the chairperson's view, it is the Commissioner's view, and all of the evidence leaders' position that we need to go further than feasibility. So we consider ourselves as looking at the actual roadmap that will assist the country solve the perennial funding issue for higher education in this country.
Well, I would want to believe that this report that is due, this interim report that is due in November, it's a matter of time. This report must be there to give some hope to those who are not at universities now.
Certainly, Mr. Mateza, someone has to turn this poison into medicine. It's not a good feeling waking up every morning to see the things that are happening in our campuses and on the streets. The Commission is taking a view that we need to urgently recommend to the President. So this interim report will not be mere observations, but I think it will have workable solutions that are being proposed for policymakers to consider.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ndwandwe. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you about the progress of the Commission as it goes along. Thank you very much for your time for now.
Thanks, Mr. Mateza.
I just want to come to you, Mr. Zolisa Mahau, down in Port Elizabeth. It has been said, has always been said, that the higher education system in South Africa is chronically underfunded. And why has this not been addressed over the last 22 years?
It's actually quite baffling, Dumile, because when students began to protest, the response from most vice chancellors of universities who know most of the issues was that they've been fighting with government about this funding issue. But what we've seen is that funding for university from the state has been decreasing quite badly. So I don't understand perhaps what statements from the president mean that we are agreeing as students and activists with the ANC that education should be free, while the state, against advices from universities, has been decreasing subsidies to fund just the small number of students that we have, because we also know that very few students, particularly black poor students, make it into the university system.
Mr. Wahau,
So there's a problem
in your submission to the commission, amongst other things, you reference the Constitution, you reference the Higher Education Act of 1997. What, in your opinion, is included in these documents but has not been addressed by government? You've mentioned some of them.
I didn't quite get
I just
that.
want to say, in your submission to the commission, you cited the Constitution of the Republic and also the Higher Education Act of 1997. What, in your opinion, is included in these documents that has not been addressed by government?
I think, look, we can praise what's in documents, but we know even with the South African Constitution that we are dealing with aspirational things that are not really come into effect in terms of what the South African public live out. So we may have those statements in the Constitution, but are we listening to the public in terms of what they are experiencing? And when we wrote that submission, what we were noting mostly is that how the terms of reference frame the debate around free education is there's a big disconnect between what students are advocating for and what even the commission's process is looking at. Because, I mean, they're raising issues around NSFAS that even itself is a death trap for students. And we need to take those things seriously because black poor students have a very low social capital. So we need to take note of how debt plays itself out in when they get jobs and when they don't get jobs, actually, and they're sitting with debt for 10 years. So you can have the Constitution with all these aspirations, but the reality is black poor students are not able to fund themselves. They are sleeping in bridges, they're entering into prostitution, and every other ill that they're trying to fund this public good.
Ian,
And I think for us, the problem is that
I just wanted to come to the studio. I'm sorry to be cutting you short.
Privilege.
I just want to come to the studio to Ian here. Ian, I understand the president's made mention of this and said the universities have to be autonomous. I don't know, he actually seems to suggest that autonomy is not sacrosanct. The other thing is universities loath to be getting funding from government and then they must abide by whatever the government tells them to do.
Well, a large part of their funding inevitably must come from government. How much is it? Well, if we look at the national budget of plus or minus R1 trillion, 1,000 billion rand, I see that the total spend in the last budget was 68.7 billion, call it nearly 70 billion. That's 7% of the national budget. That is not an insignificant amount. And that is stated to go up to 80 billion in the next 3 years. So I'd like to point out to our correspondent in Nelson Mandela that there are very definite plans to increase it. Maybe the rate of increase isn't accelerating to his liking, but certainly the amount in nominal terms is increasing, as is the amount that has to be spent on all sorts of other government services. And I think that is very important to note.
Well, we'll continue our discussion here on the fees. I've actually titled this Free Education Now Lifetime. We'll continue our discussion. If you'd like to join us, you can phone us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts to rights and recourse at sabc.co.za. Stay with us.
Did you know that Vilakazi Street is the only street in the world to have housed 2 Nobel Prize winners? Vilakazi Street in Orlando West, Soweto, southwest of Johannesburg in the Republic of South Africa, has been home to Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Nelson Mandela's house was a modest family house from 1946 and still maintains those features. Archbishop Desmond Tutu still owns his house in Vilakazi Street since 1975 and often goes to stay there when visiting Johannesburg. Because of its popularity, the street has an influx of tourists. Restaurants with local cuisine have mushroomed around it, creating job opportunities for the locals and improving the lifestyle in the area. Orlando West High School in Vilakazi Street is known for its creative role during the famous 1976 uprising.
David brought back black and white photography to life through the Zanzibar exhibition.
I'm a fanatic for tones, and I love the kind of tones and gradients and the greys, and it never bores me.
We're representing South Africa. I mean, we're flying the flag there, so it's a beautiful thing for us.
The dance floor is always lit when DJ Black Coffee hits the decks. He was praised for his appearance at this year's Coachella Music Festival in California. And he recently bagged the International Achievement Award at the 2016 Summers. Catch trends for that 1-hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse to discuss the Fees Must Fall project and the Fees Commission, and we want to find out whether it is feasible for South Africa to fund a fee-free higher education system. Ian, the other thing for me, when this call was made in the Freedom Charter, times were different than they are today.
Very
the
much
ANC
so.
was not in government and could hardly know what the state of the economy would be and how the economy would be influenced by world economy.
True. And that has made a significant difference. After all, when they took over from the previous dispensation, we were close to a bankrupt economy. So there was a large amount of correction that had to be done regarding the allocation of spending. But foremost to the ANC, they did that. We reduced our debt burden, we got to a balanced budget, and we were properly managed from a financial point of view. Regrettably, this is no longer so to the same extent, and that is also part of the problem.
Let's take this call from Cape Town. Kennedy, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mateza.
Yes, sir.
I think higher education must not be looked at in isolation. We have education, it must be looked at education as a whole, because we have got kids whose doors of education are closed because of infrastructure challenges at a grassroots level, transport, and sometimes bridges which are not there in grade 1 to actually when they need to go to university. So if we say higher education must be free, are we also giving the same better opportunities to those kids who are learning underneath the trees? I think it's time for South Africa to really ask a question: what is the role of a responsible citizen and student also? We say higher education is underfunded, but we forget to also say South Africa is one of those countries which has got free housing for the poor of the poorest. What do I mean there, Mr. Mateza? I think it means South Africa has got some competing needs. So a citizen, a true citizen must also participate. If you can afford to pay, you need to pay also for your children. Because at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money which we are saying free education, but it's us who are actually paying for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kennedy. I don't know whether you heard Kennedy there, Mr. Mahau. I don't know whether you heard Kennedy, whether you want to respond to him. In other words, he says education must be looked at in its totality, not just higher education.
Yeah, we've heard that. And if you note our recent article and the conversation, what we mentioned is that there shouldn't be this sense that higher education is not a priority and there are other issues to attend to. The model that we designed to fund higher education must take into cognizance the other social needs, such as investments in healthcare and in the basic education system, which it is important to note that this pro-poor idea actually exists in the healthcare system and in the basic education system. And what has it resulted in? You know, we find that those services are so-called pro-poor, but they're not delivering quality to the South African public. So when we say there is a pro-poor proposal from government, is it really what the South African public need? So our argument in our submission is that we need to increase funding beyond this limited budgetary constraints. There are areas in which we can raise the capital for funding higher education and other social services. And one of the things we note is that there is about 300 billion that we lose through capital flight, another 200 billion that we lose to illicit financial outflows, and those can raise our tax base. And we need to tax high income earners.
Well, we'll come to where the
increase that tax.
Mr. Mahau, we'll come to where the money might be coming from, but I just want to go to something else that Mr. Mahau made reference to, Ian, and that is everything that is pro-poor is poor. In other words, there's this issue of trust between what the Minister of Higher Education announced 2 weeks ago and what the students want. This is issue of trust. Is there an issue of trust?
And it's a factor, and it's not unjustifiable. What we have to look at is the fact we've done some research which shows that those schools starting at primary level that are that take the least amount in fees are those that get the worst results. Is there a connection? Well, that's a debate, isn't it? And I think, so are we then, if we transfer that date through to secondary education and tertiary education, let's say it's a risk, and I think that has to be considered. But maybe it is also because those schools that are most underfunded are outside the urban areas. And of course, there's been this massive move towards urbanization, and that has left a large number abandoned, so to speak. But really, yes, I think what we have to say is that in the urbanized areas, school goers make up a far larger percentage of the top population, over 90% now, than they did, say, under the previous dispensation. Progress has been made, but not necessarily as quickly as all would appreciate.
Mr. Mahau, you in your submission to the Commission, you quoted the report of the Ministerial Committee on Review of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme of 2010. You also quoted the Green Paper of Post-School Education and Training in 2012. You also quoted on the report of Working Group of Free University Education for the Poor in South Africa in October 2012. If all of these documents are in the possession of the Department of Higher Education and Training, why has these things that are in these documents not been implemented?
The response that we know of most of those commissions is that Treasury can just not find the money yet. So there isn't really a justification for not implementing these things, and perhaps they are waiting for the public to act out, which students are so doing right now. Because it is a trend in South Africa that commissions will sit, they will give their findings, but government will not act.
Well, I know you also have an issue of trust around commissions, because you say in your document, after the TRC and the Marikana Commission, many do not trust commissions to provide real solutions.
Yeah, it is as if our government is listening to someone else other than the public. Even in how it has framed the terms of reference of the commission, while it is alleging that it is responding to student demands, it is not informed by the discourses that students are making use of, because students are talking about memory and trauma in post-apartheid South Africa, and seeing that they cannot be ensured a future in this country.
Let me come to you, Ian, again. Let me come to Ian here. I'm sorry to be interrupting you, Mr. Mahau. The submission made by Treasury and the Fees Commission has spelled out the result of a no-fee higher education between 2017 and 2030, which is the time covered in the National Development Plan. And it will require, according to the Treasury, 552.5 billion rand in additional funding for universities and 90.9 billion rand for TVET colleges. Where will this money come from?
It isn't there. The reality is it's not going to be there. What we have to realize, we're in a very slow growth situation in our economy, perhaps even a no growth situation. So there's not going to be additional income coming in which can be apportioned by Treasury to other good causes. Let's call education a good cause, a best cause in fact. So if we haven't got that, it's easy to say Treasury haven't got round to finding the money yet. Well, there's no piggy bank to raid. We've done all of that, and I'm afraid the coffers are close to being dry. And until the economy picks up, until the business sector, until consumers and business start spending, and that's not in the short term, then we're not going to find the income. There's not going to be spending, which is going to lead to tax, which is going to lead to an increase in government revenue, which will then be split up amongst all those good causes. It's not in sight just yet.
Let's take this call from Sabelo in Cape Town. Sabelo, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Mono about Dumile Mateza.
About. Oh, George. Oh.
Okay.
Garden route.
In the Southern Cape, in about Indo and Furniture Tam 9, Kobana, kufikelele ixesha ngokubana urhulumente wethu we-ANC athe afezekise isithembiso sakhe awasenzayo abo bantwana abalwayo ngoku bengekazali kuquka nam lo bakhumbula ke bawo kunyaka amawaka -1956 sathi sathembiswa imfundo yasimahla kumqulu wezenkululeko. Ngoku ke kufikele lo xesha uba ke urhulumente wethu afezekise eso sithembiso eso njinazo ngokumongameli sitho phaa e-TV simbukele. Bendike ndabukela ke msasazi nalapha kwinkqubo yenu yezeendaba apha ku-404 caciso somimfundo sithi abalweli tywala okanye bawulela ntoni balwela inkonzo iservice ke ngesingesi le ke imfundo ke kweli xesha langoku siyacela urhulumente azise imfundo yasimahla kubantwana bethu. Inkosi msasazi.
Thank you very much, Ken Sabelo. Sabelo, they are saying, for your benefit, Ian, he says, the ANC government that is in power must fulfill its promise. The promise it made in 1955, and we were promised free education. They must fulfill that promise. It reminds me of a hymn by Tio Soga, Mr. Baha, what do you say to what, if you heard Sabelo?
No, I agree with him that they need to fulfill the promise. But I need to also bring into the audience's view that students are arguing for free, decolonized education because in as much as some of the anxieties are about getting a degree which will get you a job, a number of students want an education that empowers them to be able to change society, because we are still suffering from basic ills that we inherited through colonialism. And we found that what is taught in universities doesn't empower students to challenge that. So we enter into workplaces and are either exploiters of our mothers in terms of those who clean the places we work in and those that we learn in. But through this fight for a decolonized education, we realized that we need to fight the dehumanizing capitalist relations of South Africa. So it isn't a discussion about affordability for students yet. It's about, is South Africa a just country?
Thank you, Mr. Mokhawe. Thank you. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. I still need to get my head around this decolonized education, because education is education, whether it's decolonized. So it depends on you, how you sift through it. If you want to join us on today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Stay with us.
They say you can tell a nation's greatness by how it takes care of the old.
Boikhutso old age home e qadilwe ke the municipality ka di 1950s. We changed it from an old age home ra it's an old age center, because re fa di services tse dingata to batsofe ba baling in the community.
Mokgatlo na mema mosala o rentse batho kwae ke siyayithanda kwae ke siyayixhasa ngento zonke.
Every year we show our gratitude to our elderly by just being present.
It's so wonderful to be here, and it's so amazing to celebrate your day. This is your day. This is not our day.
Re ga bua le bo Osmanana ba bua hore re hloka sena re hloka sane re di rekile di teng kaofela dintho tsena.
Re batla ho bona seriti sa motho e mong le e mong se ntlafala. Mo re ka kenyang letsoho teng re tlo buela re khutla hape re kenya letsoho.
Le feel a very great start, and it will a very long way.
We salute those who give our elders their dignity back. SABC Foundation, inspiring greater possibilities.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we discuss the fees must fall call by students around the country from universities around the country. Let's take this call from Puseletso in Mafikeng. Puseletso, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Dumile.
Yes, sir. What's your point?
Look, Dumile, I agree with Mr. Mokhawe there in relation to the issue of the fees, free education. The issue of free education, we should not actually analyze it from an abstract position. It did not start in 2015. This has since been an ANC historical mission from 1955, 1976, 1985, 1990, and so on. Even in 1992, the ANC released a document acknowledging that they will be able to provide free education. Now, the issue of free education should not be treated as something which came last year with the students based on the current economic challenges. You know, that's point number one. So it's very myopic of anybody who seeks to say the government cannot afford. Let us look at the money which this government lost from 1999 till to date. More than 720 billion rands of the taxpayers' money remains unaccounted for as a result of corruption. Currently, we have 1 trillion which the government has signed the nuclear deal, which in any way is not going to benefit the country. And as the labor movement as well, we've been in this issue for quite a number of years. One of the issues which NUMSA kept on raising was the issue of the industrialization of the economy, which will also, that on its own, assist in terms of making funds accessible. Because once you begin to industrialize the economy, it means the economy will create more jobs, more artisans and entrepreneurs will come into the fore and assist to grow the economy. But now, because of the type of government which leads us, they do not have the interest of this society at heart. Look at the rampant corruption in the state government. We have the Nkandla questions this side. You have the ESCOMs here. You have people being given a family given 1.4 billion tender for feeding scheme at Telkom. Then you are telling the nation that South Africa, as it is, it cannot, And lastly, in conclusion, I think President Zuma, to a larger extent, has actually shortchanged the students. Last year, he made serious concession that there will be 0% fee hike, which some of us kept on asking, what is the significance of 0%? Because some of us, we knew that this year they are going to increase it was around 6% or so. But the question was, will the ANC be able to give free education, as the caller from Eastern Cape said in Xhosa, that this is not a new thing. It has been there ever since. The challenge is that there is no political will to provide free, basic, and decolonized education to the students. And it is very myopic as well by Blade, saying only the rich people will pay and the poor won't pay. Which barometer are you using to determine who's poor, who's rich? How long will that process take in trying to determine who's rich, who's poor? So I think that's my contribution to the debate. Free education is possible to me in South Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lezo. You raised a number of issues, and he touched on the issues we were also going to touch on. But I want you, in your response, both of you, to take that question with this question. Could this be the time bomb many analysts have been talking about with regard to budget expenditure prioritization? Meaning that we'll have to forego things like the nuclear energy power project, wasteful expenditure by government departments and state-owned enterprises.
It sounds like you referring to the nuclear development program as wasteful. You may be right.
That's what some people are saying.
I would like to quote the Minister of Finance. No, but I'd like to quote the Minister of Finance, for whom I personally and many have a very high regard, who said, if we could cut out all the crime and corruption only regarding government contracts, we'd have enough money. There lies the nub of the problem. We have to do something about the moral values of the nation. Have they changed for better or for worse over the last 20-odd years? Well, I can't define that. But certainly it is a major part of the problem. If we could cut that out, we'd have the money. Do we put in more policemen? Do we put more gatekeepers? How do we go about it? So far, we haven't found an answer to that.
Mr. Makau, do you want to respond to that? Because you raised some of these issues earlier.
Yeah, look, I welcome the submissions around crime, corruption, but we need to talk about the hoarding of wealth in South Africa. I think we've got about, the stats from Oxfam say about 60%, 62 people own about 40% of the wealth of South Africa. And that's where most of our problems stem from, inequality. So if we're going to tell the missing middle that if you can afford, you must pay, then let's go directly to those that can afford basic services for the millions of people in this country, the rich. So that's why we are suggesting a wealth tax, perhaps. So let's not create another risky system by saying the user pays. Because there are not enough rich people in terms of those who are looking to attend university in South Africa to pay for the university infrastructure. So let's have a more rigorous tax system that doesn't put the burden on poor people. So yes, let's
get this. Let's
rethink our notion of wealth.
Let me get this right, Ian.
Yes.
I think Mr. Mahal made reference to hoarding of wealth, and many people are saying South Africa's private sector does not reinvest into the economy, and there are many ways to reinvest. But the issue I have trouble with is the students are requesting that the private sector should play its part in education by contributing to the cost of it. What they seem not to realize is that business is run on a basis of a return on investment. And if we cannot deal with a high number of dropouts at universities, it would be throwing money away into the sea. There is also the phenomena of students repeating courses and repeating overstay their stay in the academic in the academic system.
Yes, becoming a professional student is a very comfortable existence, but it's not justifiable. And regarding this view of the private sector not making their contribution, I'd like to point to the universities of South Africa, and a person who's not popular amongst all of those students. Cecil John Rhodes was one of the biggest ever contributors to the public university sector. I think it's something to be borne in mind. And really, regarding the hoarding of wealth, there are many who have, especially those who've newly made this wealth in this last decade or two, who are seeing that we've got to reform our standards, our moral standards, our governance standard, and are doing something about it. Take the new mayor of Johannesburg, Herman Mashaba. Just he's got one view of that: justifiable expenditure, justifiable reward. And I think that is hard to take away, especially when you see that 90% of the tax in South Africa is paid by less than 10% of the population. Surely the wealthiest are doing their bit in the meantime towards supporting the fiscus.
I just want to take this call from Parky from Cape Town, because I've got a view on this issue of private sector having to put in their money where their mouths are. Yes. Parky, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Mr. Matez, as always, in fact, I think I must just say thank you very much for taking my call, because you've just said it exactly what I was just about to say. The participation, or rather the strategic role of the private sector, business, so to say. But however, I would like to say, Mr. Matez, I hear some people, including Sabelo and our panelists, one of our panelists in the studio, relating to what the ANC has actually promised South Africans back in 1955. You know, I'd like to remind people that, remember, those were different economic landscapes. Fast forward to when we got into our democracy in 1994, and then 2016 when we saw Steels Must Fall campaign. Mr. Matez, I think these debates will actually assist us to getting forward. But however, I would like to put it this way. As we are contributing into finding possible solutions to realizing the free education, Mr. Mateza, let us also ask ourselves very, very serious questions as to the cost of running these universities and colleges. Because I want to believe that free education is really not about at the university level. Colleges, one way or the other, will actually follow suit. What about the cost of running those universities? Because I want to believe universities and colleges will actually have to have money for infrastructure and remuneration, that is now for salaries and wages. I'm glad, Mr. Mateza, in conclusion, that today we have got the economists in the studio, but please do touch on the participation of business, because these are business people who actually take on the graduates once they leave the universities.
Thank you, Parky. Thank you, Parky.
Pulling them into the discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I don't know, we had a slide there. I don't know if you saw that slide. Mr. Maha, I want to come to you. We had a slide there of damages that has taken place at universities. Cars being burned, buses being burned, libraries being burned. And for me, for all that I care, that kind of money, one of the problems, I think it was raised, lamented by the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Witwatersrand, Adam Habib, saying nobody has been arrested. 640 million has been damaged and nobody has been arrested.
Look, there are thousands of students who leave universities quietly, pack their bags and go home because they can't afford. And there's no hoo-ha about that. That is a violence. There is millions being excluded from making a better life of themselves by getting a degree, and there's no discussion about that. So if students are frustrated and feel that they are unheard, and they happen to burn a building, we need to be balanced in how we view that. Obviously, we cannot excuse the fact that
you can never be balanced in how you view the burning of a library and the burning of an institution.
There are various tensions at play here, and I, for one, do not also ignore the fact that there are those trying to delegitimize the protest. There have been talks about how private security is acting in ways where they are trying to actively demobilize students. So in terms of these burnings, we need to also account for their role in the burnings of buildings. Can we trust them? Because
are you saying private security has had in burning of buildings?
It's possible. We can't just throw that responsibility to students. They are stationed on campuses. They have equal access to the tools to burn these buildings as well.
I think we'll just wait for that, because I think the police are doing their investigations around this issue before we throw around. The one thing, Ian, I want to talk about is, earlier I said I want to make a reference to this contribution by the private sector. I used to stay at a residence with some Wits students, and all the engineering students were sponsored by Anglo-American.
Yes.
And they gave recently, I think this week, the Chamber of Mines released the stats of how many students are being funded by the mines. Is that not enough, or should they do more?
Well, perhaps they're doing as much as they can. Remember, take the mining sector as a start. The mining sector is in a dreadful state at the moment. It has actually shrunk over time, and its rate of growth is going in the wrong direction, just because of the global economy. And I think despite all this, we've found huge contributions. Look at, you mentioned Wits. Look at the Donny Gordon School of Medicine there. Really, it's extraordinary. Look at Pretoria, and we've got their business school. Actually, it's in Johannesburg, but it's from the University of Pretoria. And really, these sort of institutions, funded almost entirely or primarily by the business sector, with massive grants running into billions of rands, you know, they are doing their bit.
Mr. Mahau, one of the other things that I picked up from the Treasury's submission to the Commission, they actually gave the Commission a copy of their fiscal policy budget review, where they say the expenditure ceiling has been reduced by 25 billion over the next 3 years compared with the 2015 medium-term budget review adjustments. Where is the money going to come from? I think what Treasury is saying, there is no money, even though we know the President said they must go and find the money.
Look, as I said, we face a problem of inequality in South Africa. The wealth exists, but it belongs to individuals and companies. And that is with the tax that they are already paying. We are arguing that they can pay more. So we need to have redistribution mechanisms from the state that can increase the amount of tax and increase the budget we have to spend on social services in South Africa.
Let us take this call. So, my apologies to interrupt you. Let's take this call from Sipho from Johannesburg. Sipho, good afternoon, and welcome to Right to Recourse.
Afternoon, Mr. Makeza. Butungile, I think the issue that you raised earlier, before you go to the private sector, the issue around conflict is the role of SRCs, is the fragmentation that we see among the student organizations. But one thing that we will tend to forget is that October is known as the African Human Rights Month. Why don't we locate the issue of access to education as a basic human right that black young students are entitled to? And the issue around the budget, I think if you look at the budget of 2016 to 2017, it has drastically increased in terms of supporting TVET colleges, universities, and the living wage of the staff. It seems that one other point that we are missing is your junior lecturers, is your senior lecturers about their living wage. And again, is the issue of many universities sitting with reserves that they are not using to can even give more bursaries to the young people. And that's where we are missing that point, because even the violence of the police, one will say, IPEC must come in, because police are even violent as well against the young people.
Ian, the issue for me really, I hear what Sipho is saying around the violence, around the issues that we need to look at when we look at this. One of the things for me that is very sad is that I'm looking at something where the grouping which Mr. Mahawi is part of made a submission that South Africa has a lot of money that is misspent or leaves its shores illegally, and we also do not have a wealth tax, even though we live in the most unequal society in the world. Is it that simple?
Not really. After all, if you accumulate the taxes on income, the indirect taxes, the tax on everything that we buy, and add up all of these, then by global standards, we've got a relatively high total tax rate. So the total contribution is fairly high. And remember, those who are wealthiest do in fact pay the most tax because they buy the most goods. So inevitably then they will be making the biggest contribution. And I think that that is very important. And a point that was just made to point to the reserves of the universities themselves. They are seen to be, they're invested where they earn an income, and that income isn't reinvested. That income is taken to improve the standard of education, the standard of facilities at those universities. So I don't think that that's there just to hoard wealth for the sake of it. It really is put to work.
Mr. Mahau, probably let's get some final observations from you as to what needs to happen to solve the impasse that we find ourselves, and what are you expecting from the imbizo the president has called tomorrow?
Look, from the imbizo, the discussions again in terms of students have only been centralized around SRCs, so I expect another 0% sort of announcement that would not take us anywhere. Because I feel like the functionaries of the state, including the Minister of Higher Education, are not taking students seriously. Students are open to engagement. Several university formations have said, here is a suggested model that you can look into, but we will not take what you are suggesting in your statement. So let us listen to what students are saying. And we need to decolonize the economists that you have in studio as well. We are
Let's get a final word from
lives here.
Economists that needs to be decolonized.
Well, I'm still a little confused as to the definition of that expression. But I would just like to make one other point, and that is that it has been calculated that if all of those student loans which are in arrears regarding repayments, that is by those who have finished their education, who have earned their degrees through in difficult circumstances, but if those could be paid back, there would be enough money. So there we are. Perhaps we can put it back again at the students' feet to some extent.
Well, there you have it. This is the views of Mr. Mahau down in Port Elizabeth, and Ian Cruikshank here with me, and the views you heard earlier from Musandwande, the spokesperson of the Fees Commission. The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the SABC and Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 5 on Wednesday morning. You can also find us on YouTube. From me and the rest of the crew, goodbye.